So I do want to start by mentioning that for those who are registered for AGU, there is a clean sponsored town hall session on COVID and climate change education that started about 3 minutes ago. So if that's something that you would like to jump into rather than an informal conversation here, you're more than welcome to do that. I posted the session link in the chat there.
Okay, that's helpful.
But for folks who do want to stay on the call and check in via our clean conversation, let's start off with announcements.
Sorry.
No worries, Ginger. Any announcements?
I'm gonna just put it. I think when we have conversation, there's just so much that we could share about AGU. That it's just like it's all for all of us and things. No, by the way, thank you on that, Patrick. Sorry if I have been poring over the schedule and somehow my schedule didn't pick up on, or I didn't manage to fold in the one going on right now. I'm not saying I'm bowing out, but it's just like, oh my God, you can still miss stuff after all this.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
It's also, especially if things are not in the main scientific list, as some things are, that a lot of people are going to miss them because there's just all this stuff, and then there's these other things off on the side of AGU. So
yeah, sure.
Well, one thing I do appreciate about this is the fact that every time I get back from AGU or GSA or anything like that, it's like there's this whole list of sessions that I wish I would have been able to attend. And the fact that they are all recorded or in the form
That's
of virtual
true.
posters.
You have to make the
It's
commitment to
recorded.
actually watch them, but
Yeah. Well, you can spread it out. So it's not quite the Gary Larson thing where the kid in the back of the room says, can I leave now? My brain's full.
well,
Yeah.
And on that, Frank, and others, is I'm sorry if maybe this is what you're already addressing, but AGU is saying, and I verified with them, that essentially all of the everything but live aspects of what's on AGU will be up until February 15th. So that was a big relief to me, that like especially the posters and things that I'm identifying and want to see, but I can't see them all, and I'm going to miss stuff. Is you have to February 15th to go back and find out what they said to get stuff. It won't get the live, but it will get the. Was that something is that what you're referring to, Frank? I mean, there's also just the 17 days we have. Yeah, great.
Yeah, and my understanding is a lot of the posters will be up. I mean, you can go back and see posters from previous years. So I guess my understanding is the posters are going to remain for longer than the 15th.
That's great.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm hoping for is I know the previous year's posters, you could access them without being an AGU member. And
yeah, I hope they do that this year.
Yeah, I'm hoping so too, because in fact, I'm thinking that I want to shoot an email off to Pernodi and see if I can maybe encourage them to do that, because I'm trying to make up a Google Earth, a Google Sheets for my students that links over to the posters. And I built a whole sheet and then discovered they can't get access to the posters yet.
That's frustrating.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let us know what you hear on that. Maybe send out an announcement. That'd be great, Frank.
Okay. Yeah, I've got to write Pernodi about a number of things, so that's definitely on the docket.
so there'll be some point that even those of us who registered for the meeting will not have access to some of the recordings anymore.
Yeah, that's how I understand it. There's a limited window to access everything from the conference.
And what are they going to do with it then? Make it not visible? I mean, that seems a little silly to me, but.
My guess is that it's a storage issue. Like I'm seeing with the
Hmm.
University of Colorado right now that they are no longer allowing us to do unlimited storage on the cloud. So for instance, we're going to have to switch all the clean call recordings from this year over to a hard drive format or a Google Drive format, something other than Zoom, because of storage issues. Zoom has changed their policies because of the overwhelming increase in traffic this year. So my guess is that's it, and they'll probably be gone after the date that AGU specified. I
Because
know
my
that for sure.
understanding was in the past is that they recorded a much more limited number of things. That's true.
Right.
But then they were available forever. Was that what I thought? You could go back to a previous meeting, and if it happened to be a recorded session, you could view it. Or maybe they'll do that. I mean, it would be nice if they did that for the named lectures, or some things, the keynotes and those kinds of things.
It would be nice before they do a purge, if they asked AGU members, which of these would you really like to see to continue?
Well, maybe you can add that into your note to Bernardi, Frank.
It's just, that's a massive effort. I mean, there's just so many members. It would be.
I know, but still, it's like I'm hoping they just don't indiscriminately make a purge, and then leave this core of on demand that maybe people want, maybe they don't.
They might ask the sections. That's more manageable if you ask the leadership of the sections.
There's an idea.
Before we get further down this road, just a couple announcements via AGU. So in addition to the town hall session going on right now on COVID and climate change, there is also the Clean AGU workshop today, 6 to 8 Eastern, 4 to 6 Mountain. Adjust appropriately for where you're at. So we'll be talking a little about Clean 10th anniversary and a lot about ACE in that workshop today and the next steps. So please.
What time is that?
That is 4 to 6 Mountain, 6 to 8 Eastern.
Do you have the link for that?
I may.
I had trouble finding workshops in the AGU schedule. I made use of my schedule, but if I couldn't find it in the AGU schedule, I couldn't put it in my schedule.
Sure. Yeah. Let me see if this will let me paste it in. Yeah. So there is the link for this afternoon's workshop in the chat there.
Okay, great.
And finally, a little later down the road here on Thursday, we are going to have a discussion based around education sessions 33 and 34 using the clean link. And that is going to be at 10 Mountain, 12 Eastern. So please feel free to join us there if you'd like to chat about anything in those sessions, whether or not you were able to attend, whether or not you're registered for AGU. Those should be fun discussions, and hopefully we'll
This is on Thursday, you said? Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thursday, 10 Mountain time. And I put the time in there. Let me get the Zoom link for that too.
Patrick, do you know if they're taping any of these, and if there's a way, might be a way to go back and watch some of them later? I didn't end up registering. But are there, I mean, and I could pay for them, even individually, but I didn't have the time or get around to trying to register for the conference.
Yep, we were just talking about that, Ginger, and the short version is we don't know what's not going to be available to those who haven't registered, but it's likely that even for those who have registered, there's going to be limited or no recordings up after mid-February.
Okay.
So
they're going to leave them up for a little bit. There may be a way to go watch them if I register late. I'll go poke around and look.
And they may leave them up for longer. We don't really know. And I was mentioning that Zoom is definitely changing their cloud storage options, having to do a lot of adjusting at CU and with the clean network storage account at CU. So that may be a factor in all this.
So one of my climate nightmares is that the world is going to be taken over by server warehouses because we don't delete anything. And these Zoom, I was looking at my iCloud photos the other day and I was like, holy crap, I need to go clean this out. I'm causing, greenhouse gas emissions to store bad pictures and screenshots.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we all probably could use a little purging of various databases. As far as
I think I'm
APU,
gonna go view the other sessions, so you can continue to have your conversation here, but I'm gonna see if I can get into that other session.
great, you got the link
Okay.
there?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Thanks, Tamara. Okay, and as far as AGU, are there any other questions about the town hall, the workshop this afternoon, or the Ed 3334 session Thursday?
Give me the rundown again in terms of the workshop this afternoon. You said 3 to 5 Mountain, or no, 4 to 6 Mountain. So that's 3 to 5 our time and out here in the West Coast. So 25th anniversary of Clean.
No,
No.
10th anniversary.
10th anniversary of Clean.
And
focus on ACE, or
yeah, so it's going to be looking at the ACE framework with some breakout rooms to look at next steps, mainly focused on ACE with a little bit about Clean 10th anniversary and just where we've come and where we might be going.
okay, cool.
Yeah, it's just a 2-hour workshop, which is quite a bit shorter than we've been doing in the past. So I think it'll run by pretty quick with probably an overview of ACE and then a few questions posed with a few breakout sessions and feedback, and then a little roundup on Clean anniversary.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about the difference between these virtual conferences and the real stuff. And when you were just talking about 2 hours, that's shorter than normal. The only thing I can say is thank God, because I've done 4 to 6 hours in Zoom calls, and it's just like your legs freeze up.
My back is such a mess. My back and my hips are just jacked up.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, this is a small group, but I want to talk to you guys about how do we, so I'm on the planning committee again for the International Association for Public Participation. And so I really want to try to make sure that we get word out into non-traditional public participation organizers. So like if you guys know of anybody in the Clean Network or anybody in just your personal networks that are not doing this typical, because we typically get like the urban planners, municipal planners, urban planners. We're starting to get more public health engagement practitioners, but I'm really hoping that we can get more people who do public involvement and public engagement around climate issues. So if you guys know of any, think about that. And then when our call for proposals go out, I'll be sure to share it with the network. But I just, I've said it before, I feel like the communications people, the people that strictly think of themselves as communications or public involvement people are not necessarily talking to the climate scientists and climate solutions people. And I'm really trying to figure out how we can start getting them in the same rooms.
So could you say a little bit more about that gathering?
So it's the organization is the International Association for Public Participation, and the public participation practitioner, the IAP2 has a set of standards from, you know, inform to consult to actually engage. So a whole bunch of what is in the ACE framework is engaging communities to take action. So who's actually going to do that work? So there are some really amazing programs that are addressing climate, like on Salt Spring Island in Canada, the council declared a climate emergency, right? But then who actually gets the people together and gets them talking, and what processes are they using to convene and to brainstorm and to create action plans? And it, you know, it will probably be the same type of people that are hired to do a major urban planning process, or even build a new freeway off ramp, you know, and do the public consulting part of that. But to get ahead of those people and start educating them, so as facilitators and or municipal planners, we get a lot of people who do public engagement, but they actually are the city's lead planner or the city's water education employee or the city's sustainability coordinator. And it's really like one of the sessions was so interesting. It was called Growing Up Boulder. This is at this last one. Are you familiar with them? Yeah, and they're just like, so Frank, they engage kids as young as preschoolers in urban planning data collection. And they had an example of taking a preschool class out on a walk to observe their neighborhood. And one of the little kids said, they're standing at an intersection, and his observation was, well, I see them, but they don't see me, regarding how to navigate a crosswalk. You know, and these are things that actually intersect with climate change and adaptation and mobility and moving people out of their cars. But, you know, and Boulder's being incredibly progressive about it, obviously. But being able to share examples like that with a wider audience, and then also getting the people from the climate side to talk to those people who have never thought about how these things integrate, or, you know, like, if you're doing a municipal comprehensive plan, what climate issues can be built into a municipal comprehensive plan? And in Washington, we're actually updating, well, we're hoping this legislative session, we're hoping to put actual things in the comp plan requirements that will force cities and counties to actually address climate issues. I don't know how far we'll go, but, you know, like, one of the things would be ensuring that you have fair access to multimodal transportation so people can get out of cars, or ensuring that you have the capacity to address urban heat island effects, or try to mediate urban heat island, and what kinds of requirements do you have in your development codes to require trees be planted or cooling centers be available, or, you know, whatever. So we'll see where that goes. But anyway, yeah, so the meeting is like a month before the NAAEE. So if you do both conferences like I did, it's all kind of a blur. Wait, where did I hear that session? Was that at NAAEE or the IAP2? And the other thing that's, if we could get more of the education people into the IAP2 world, is one of the things that was really kind of shocking to me at NAAEE was how many talking heads and how boring the sessions were. And they were not interactive. Most of them were not interactive. Whereas in the IAP2 conference, completely online also, I'd say 70% of the sessions were somehow interactive. So, and that's because these are people who are trained to engage people in decision making and how to do public engagement. So anyway, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but
That's a
So here's,
helpful overview.
I was, Ginger, there's a couple of things I was thinking about here. First of all, in terms of people, there's a guy by the name of Greg Walker who's in the communications department over at Oregon State. And I recommend him as kind of a person who'd have tendrils out to other people. I met him for the first time at COP23. He regularly attends all the UNFCCC events. So anyway, I'm happy to send his email over to you because I think
Okay.
he'd be a good person to touch bases with. Portland State, we have had what's called the Institute for Sustainable Solutions. It ran out of money a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
It's still keeping going. There's at least they haven't told any of us who are fellows with ISS that we're no longer fellows because the organization no longer exists or anything like that. But they're somewhat reconstituting, and they would probably be a good resource too.
Right. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
and even like there is an IAP2 local chapter, the Cascade chapter is in Portland and they're active. And so that might be someplace I can find out, when do they meet and stuff. Or that might be something, Frank, that you would be interested in popping into some of their meetings and seeing.
Yeah, I think so.
Things. Yeah.
And the other thing I'm wondering is, when's the date of this conference that you're looking at?
It's usually the first week of September. Like this year, it was right after Labor Day.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll
Yeah.
put out, I think we want to put out the call for submissions and I think we're hoping to get them out February. And we've already decided that it's going to be online again because there's just too many unknowns and we don't want to plan an in-person conference and, and then have to pull it.
Yeah. Well, I was contemplating that in regards to the virtual bridge work that we've been doing here in Portland. And we've been out talking with communities in Australia and India and various other places about starting their own local bridges. And so the mode I'm in right now is recruiting other communities. And it sounds like the conference might be a good option, but if we're looking at COP26, that's only 2 months beforehand. So it's might not be enough time for people to really get ahead of steam and get something organized in their area.
Well, and if I put you in touch with the folks that are in Portland, they may be, some of them have been involved in IAP2 more deeply.
Okay.
Or are maybe on the board, and it is an international organization. So we have a very strong cadre in Australia.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
And it's funny that several of the Australian members actually have consulting firms that are based up here in the USA, but they're, they keep their links in Australia. So major consultancies are actually Australian based firms. So, and the other thing is that they're trying to launch it in Latin America, which I think we probably through clean or through for sure for NAAEE, we have lots of contacts down there. Not, but we have some.
Okay, cool.
Throw a couple things out. Maybe you've already thought about this, but I feel like when it comes to bringing folks in, one of the questions is always, who can you fund? And I don't know, who can you fund?
Okay.
Because I don't know what the cost for the conferences are, but if you are asking folks to jump in who may not be planning on it, that's always a helpful incentive.
Yeah, and actually, Frank, with the I'll get a hold of Greg, but that we do have a pretty robust scholarship pool. And we might actually made a ton of money on this last conference, like way more than our goal. It was actually really crazy because our, like our break even for registration, I want to say was like 120. And I think we sold 100 or 240 or 260 registrations. It was insane. I mean, people were signing up the day before, but we have a lot of scholarships and we really, really focus a lot on mentoring. So like with the ISS or with the communications department at OSU or with at Boulder and the other colleges with the communications and environmental studies programs, if public engagement is something that, it's a term that probably people don't really know that there's a practice, a formal practice for public engagement, So finding the students and recruiting the students, and it was really cute. We had one young man that went to Simon Fraser, and he just finished his graduate degree, and he was trying to decide where he wanted to try and apply for work. And I can't remember, he was in like environmental studies or something. And he came to the conference and it just blew his mind, and he was full of questions. And he actually called for can we have one more session when everything's done on Friday at 3:30 in the afternoon? And about 20 of us just went into this last minute impromptu Zoom session and talked to Melvin about career opportunities and ideas. And it was really, really, really rewarding for us to see this young person just really find potential direction. Now it's COVID. Who knows where he found a job? He's probably working at a 7-Eleven right now, but.
Well, I'll also throw it out there, like, Rising Voices is pretty excellent for Indigenous leaders around climate issues. It's a partnership with UCAR. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but they've got folks all over the country in a lot of different Indigenous and tribal communities, and a lot of science communities, because it's really focused on the reconciliation of science and traditional ecological knowledge. So I threw the link in the chat there.
Awesome.
I feel like one thing about some groups like Rising Voices, if you're going to make an ask for them to show up to your conference, it's usually helpful to start to come into the group a bit and show up for their events. So they usually have their conference in May. This year they did it, it was cool. Instead of trying to do like a 3 to 5 day intensive, they did an afternoon once a month, and it just ended, actually last Friday was their final session. And so they chose a different topic each time, like food security, energy, different topics that brought in different crowds. So anyway, I threw the link in there.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, they have a pretty active listserv, so you might jump on there, and that could provide some helpful connections.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool.
It's interesting. I've been doing this process of creating a set of guidelines for art and science partnership by interviewing national experts kind of in that realm. A really specific version of art science partnerships focused on catalyzing community action around environmental and social justice issues. But in those conversations, so much about project success is identifying and working with community champions. And I definitely feel like there's groups of people in every community who are well networked and creating action, doing that on the ground work you're describing within their community context, but they're not folks who are generally well networked in some of these other spaces. They're often quite focused within their city or region. And so it's an interesting question how you go about reaching out to those folks for these more national efforts. And I think some of it might have to do with connecting to them on community level projects specifically. So I don't know if there's a way to do that in your call, or to reach out even to different universities or planning projects and ask them, well, who are the people doing the on the ground work in your context?
Well, and actually, I think we've actually added that to our call for proposals is, can you include your people that you work with in your presentation? Like actually bring a community organizer, or, you know, who was your contact that helped you get the right people in the room, and actually have that person on the panel or presenting as well, and not just the traditional practitioner. So I think that's basically, you know, what you're saying, and then finding them. And I think, you know, like in my community, people trying to work on stuff, we're not getting anywhere. We're beating our head against the wall, but but there may be other people in other communities who are pushing the envelope that are not official government or collegiate or anything else programs. They really are community programs, and we may not know about them. So how do we find those people?
Where are you at, Ginger?
I'm in Richland, Washington, the current hotspot of Washington, where our sheriffs are attending meetings with 250 people and won't enforce anything. And yeah.
Where is Richland?
It's, if you think of the Columbia River and the Snake River, if you can imagine the North American map where the Snake River comes into the Columbia, there's that giant U bend it makes from traveling pretty much north-south to the big U and then traveling west. And I'm at the top of the U before it heads upstream. So I like to, it's funny because even if you have a really crappy map, the Columbia and Snake are usually on it.
Yeah.
And when I'm in classrooms, I pointed out, I actually rolled down the old map and like, you guys, look, this is where we live. So if you ever go on an exchange and people ask you where you live, you can get any map of the world or even a crappy old globe, and you can show people where you live because these large landmarks are here.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, that in the ACE framework dialogues and the conversations I was facilitating, there were people from Spokane, there were people from Seattle, but you're kind of at the tip of the triangle of like where the base is Spokane and Seattle, and you're the tip of the equilateral triangle there.
Mm.
And not many folks from that region that I saw.
Yeah, well, we're kind of out here on our own. We're like, you know, and environmentally speaking, I work for the state environmental agency, and they make all of these assumptions about public behavior or public public acceptance of XYZ. And we don't have that here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah, we're only 4 hours from Seattle and 3 hours from Portland, and you couldn't be more head in the sand, ignoring the facts, at least from a public official perspective.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, Eastern Washington. Well, you're not really in Eastern Washington though either.
I mean, it's really more. It's almost central, but I mean, through Eastern Washington, other than Spokane, is very, very rural, extremely rural. So, yeah, it's really mind-boggling because we have one of the Battelle National Labs here, and the initial IPCC report. One of the contributors is my friend Steve Gann, who's a well-known climate scientist. He lives here. The whole community was built on Hanford and now is living on Hanford cleanup and science. And yet we cannot include climate change in our Richland comprehensive plan or planning documents.
You know, I think it would be interesting. I'm starting to look at scheduling for next year quite a bit and organizing different presentations. And we've got a few folks started, but there's a lot of space. And I think it'd be really interesting to have a session or two on connecting with rural communities. I don't, in my recollection, we haven't really brought that up on many calls, or at least spent the full call on it. So, yeah.
And that's the weird thing too, is that we're in the middle of nowhere, but we're the 4th largest metro in Washington.
Yeah.
Not rural, right? But we have we have county commissioners who still are unduly controlled by farmers and big ag. And we have weird stuff where there's 2 counties on either side of the river, and where Portland has metro, which is a, multi-jurisdictional, it serves what is it, 24 cities and the 3 counties? Well,
Yeah,
no,
that sounds about right.
that's not, so they've got that regional agency that does the roads, the zoo, the museums, the parks, I think waste management, right? I think waste management. So we've got 2 different counties, 4 different municipalities, almost 350,000 people. And the only joint agencies we have are our health department and our transit agency. And everything else is street. And so therefore you have all these competing interests. And because individually, like one county, because its total population, even though it's really densely or in one area, it's considered on certain scales, it's still considered a rural county. So they don't have to adhere to certain guidelines about commute trip reduction, for example, because it's a rural county. But the cumulative effect, it's not a rural county, and you're all driving to the same places to go to work, and they have 90% single occupancy vehicles, and it's very weird. Figuring out how to bring weird outliers. And, Bend, I bet Bend has issues, and you've got the historic farm and resource extraction communities around Bend, and then you've got tourism, and there's, how do they deal with that? And how do you deal with?
Well, Bend is getting to be a very interesting, the Bend that I knew as a kid is nothing like the Bend now. And I mean that in terms of the politics.
Mm-hmm.
180 degrees. And it's just one of those very strange little progressive enclaves out there east of the Cascades.
Right. Yeah, but that's probably within the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 21st century has definitely changed it.
Yeah. And then what happens when you get to Redmond? Is it polar opposite?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think Patrick, that's a really good idea for, and just in the West in general, because like, even if you think about comprehensive planning, does Colorado have comprehensive planning, or like growth management requirements?
I'm not sure if we've got something on a statewide level. There's a lot of citywide plans.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you think about growth management planning, and the rural people are like, we don't need to do that. We don't need to follow your city rules. And let's use wildfire as an example. If they put in the growth management plan that you have to start planning for how you're going to address wildfire, or how you're going to manage growth into areas that might be susceptible to wildfire, and the rural people are going to be like, well, it doesn't matter. We're so spread out. We don't want to have to follow these rules that you city people are enforcing on us. But actually, those are the rules that could actually position them to better protect themselves. But they can't see that. And a lot of it is messaging, I'm sure. And again, it's like when agencies like my agency just assume, oh, you'll take care of it. But nobody out there is prepared to or interested in taking care of it.
kind of makes me think, rather than saying like communicating climate change and resiliency, sustainability in rural contexts, maybe the right presentation or set of presentations is navigating polarization.
Mhm. Or just
they-
using
one of-
economic arguments.
Two things I've oftentimes thought about. First of all, finding academics that were raised in blue collar families. I mean, that's my situation. My dad was a machinist. And so, I mean, that being people who can identify the values that they got from their upbringing that can translate into where they are now. The other thing I think about is people who are geologists who spend a lot of time in both worlds and trying to figure out how to mobilize folks like that to be able to talk to people in rural communities.
I've been thinking a lot about communication models and a lot about how we phrase this interaction. And I've been a little stuck on the idea that like so many of these guides, the CRED guide and the big climate communication guides, they really focus on how you talk to an audience. They still use that language of how do you go and talk to those people, rather than how do you facilitate a conversation that equalizes power and status so that people feel like they're being met. And I don't really think we have a lot of communication guides that look at that paradigm. It's starting to shift though. I think that how do you talk to those people was more the first 10, 15 years of the 2000s. And I do think we're getting in a place of shifting, but there's not a whole lot of supporting resources on that style of engagement.
I think that's a really valuable question. And I would be willing to bet, like in the P2, the public engagement community, some of these P2 practitioners have the answers or have good case studies of how they have done that. I remember a session a couple of years ago, and it was a case study from Australia, and they basically set up it was almost like a Reddit site. So people could just post, it was moderated so that you couldn't like attack others or whatever. But they basically just set up a whole website where the community could be sharing ideas and commenting and talking about stuff and no bad ideas, no ridiculing each other, no name calling. So it was a safe place. And they got a lot of rich engagement from that. And from people that may not have come to a meeting or may not have spoken at a meeting because they wouldn't, want to be, they just, can't speak in public or whatever. There's just so many variables. Even have time to come to a meeting. With the website sitting there with the questions, if you get off work at 11:30 and don't wind down and go to bed till 1, maybe you'll visit the website and actually contribute. Anyway.
Well, I think to get a broader range of perspectives on your question about IAP2 and engagement, maybe it would be beneficial if you wanted to present that not just the public participation conference, but a bit on the realm of public participation.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally do that and share like our that framework or whatever. I'm drawing a blank, but we have the different levels of from the old school decide, announce, defend to actually doing public engagement and what the process should be. And I could definitely do like a short course on that and talk about and also at that I could share like where we have local chapters. So you know, if there is an organization near you and you want to go check it out as a climate educator, people can find them more easily. You can go to the website, but if I shared it directly, that would make it, you know, one less step for people.
I think that'd be great. Yeah,
Okay.
I think folks would be interested.
So I have an ask that I just put a link in the chat box about. I talked about the climate toolkit in previous clean calls and this sort of thing. And two things that have evolved since I think I last talked about it. Number one is it's become an open source document that's on PDX Scholar through Portland State. And it's been in place since about July, and it's actually had about 330 downloads in about 25 countries. So
Wow.
I'm kind of pleased about that. But the other thing that's also important, and this is where the ask comes in, I got some money to, over the next year, do some additional work on the manual because it was originally built for in-person classes and teaching remotely for the first time. I've had to do quite a few tweaks on it.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, I was encouraged by our Office of Information Technology to apply for a mini fund and got it, which means that as I revise this thing, I'm going to be looking for more beta testers.
Okay.
Next term, I'm not teaching, but I am going to be the fly on the wall on a couple of folks who are teaching sections of the same course I teach, who also use the manual, just to see what happens in classes. And so to some extent, I'm looking for that sort of thing where I can be an observer, but also just looking for folks to grab activities out of the manual and try them in their situations and give me feedback about what works and what doesn't. So.
So what I'm hearing here is you would also like to grab a presentation slot in January, Frank.
I can add that to my list, so let's do it.
Sure.
All right. Hey, I'm going to use this informal call here. When can I put
that's
you guys
good.
on the schedule? Choose your Tuesday.
Let me look at my calendar.
Yeah, let me look at my calendar.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, it's pretty wide open on my calendar.
Let's see. What do I have in January? I might have stuff. Let's see, we're on Tuesdays. Probably the 19th or 26th would be better for me.
Okay. Any preference?
Let's just say the 26th in case I have Hanford meetings.
Perfect. And Frank?
I'll grab the 19th if yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Hey, thanks, y'all.
Cool. I'm excited.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Yeah, I definitely think both of these topics will make great conversations, and that it'll be really beneficial to have a bigger group for discussion.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'm also looking for is, I mean, since I'm gonna probably hang up my spurs from classroom teaching in the next year or so, I deliberately designed the manual so it could be used in community situations. And I really would love to have a conversation with people in the network about how that might be possible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a friend of mine did a climate science for activists series once at a local brew pub, and it was mainly lecture stuff. And I'd want to do something different. And actually, since we're virtual now, it's much easier to do something different because everybody's sitting in front of a computer.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually lots of opportunities.
Yeah, that's cool.
Definitely.
I'll go look at your thing, and we have monthly citizens climate lobby calls. Maybe I can try one of your modules, units, whatever, with that group and see what they think.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be cool. Be cool.
Yeah, I'll check it out too. I'm teaching creative climate communication with a couple folks next semester, and I don't know, you think anything in there jumps into that realm, Frank?
You know, as well, critique of the introduction would be great.
Okay.
The introduction, I'm is stepping off a bit of a ledge to not be the objective scientist any longer.
Mm,
And so I mean, the whole thing is premised on the fact that we're not here to debate climate science
right.
or human involvement in it. We're here to look at tools to better understand it.
Mhm.
And some of those tools are psychological in addition to the scientific. And so I've tried to deal with a little bit of that in much the same way that Dawn and company did in the teacher-friendly guide.
Mhm.
So, but the other part of things, and as far as the communications, the communications part of things, the last part of the manual is the last part of the manual is going forward. It's a number of activities having to do with climate resilient community design.
Oh, cool.
And I've been experimenting with some ways of using Google Earth to have students rethink what a community could look like that would genuinely be resilient.
Mhm.
Do you listen to America Adapts at all? The podcast?
I don't. I'm not even aware of it. So.
Oh gosh, it's amazing.
Okay.
It's America Adapts, and I would look through the archive, but there's some really interesting stuff. He did a series in Massachusetts of the beach communities in Massachusetts
Mm-hmm.
that are pretty interesting. There are some really interesting stuff on New York City, actually. And, you know, obviously Portland is not a coastal city, but close enough to the coast that it might inspire them. And then last year's episode, he went to the Keeping History Above Water conference.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hosted in Pensacola, I think. Yeah, Pensacola is really old, right?
Yeah.
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 Be St. Augustine. I think it was hosted in St. Augustine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just some of the really interesting things. So at the conference, he actually just interviews a whole bunch of the different speakers that are at the conference, and you get to hear different things that people are doing in their communities. And it was really interesting hearing, you know, this community is doing this and this community is not doing this, or we aren't even allowed, you know, again, we aren't even allowed to use climate change in our city documents, but, you know, the planning director is actually doing this, you know? So, yeah, but the interesting things to share with your students. And the other thing is that Doug, the guy that's doing it, they have actually created classroom guides for a number of the podcast episodes. So you could, you know, look at what you're already teaching and then look at how he's set up the classroom guide and see if any of those would be fun other assignments to build in. And in the creative climate communications class too, possibly.
You know, I got to jump to another call here in a minute.
Yeah,
but one of the things that you raised a whole bunch of ideas in the back of my brain, because I have the students do a capstone project as part of global environmental change, and that project is to identify a community having a climate action plan, do the basic sort of natural history on it, and then look at their climate action plan and their progress on it. And again, it's I've been looking at ways that they can integrate Google Earth into that, so you can actually take people through a tour of the community.
Mhm.
What would be great to do is find a community and then find a class within that community that the students can essentially, what's the old word for it? Geez, now since we're off of snail mail, I forget what it is.
Pen
Pen pal.
pals? Pen
Yeah.
pals.
But having the people in that community that they're doing a report on, doing short little video clips and sending them over to my students. Anyway, I gotta go, but it's yeah. So yeah, I got the 19th down on my calendar.
Okay,
Awesome.
I have the 26th. You guys
Okay,
have a good
cool.
week. Talk to you
You-
later.
Both.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bob. Bye.